Once again, good afternoon, everyone. We're just getting ready to start the webinar. Sheila, there we go. We brought it up. Okay, so welcome to today's webinar. My name is Karen Mutimer, and I'm one of the managers on Unanet's customer success team. Today, we are going to discuss tips and tricks for project managers. And just a few housekeeping items before we get started. If you've been to our webinars before, you know that we've asked you to hold your questions, but instead type them into the questions box on your webinar dashboard. And I will be monitoring those questions, and we will review all the questions then at the end of the presentation. This webinar is recorded and will be available usually within 1 week after today's date. And at the end of this webinar, we will actually share with you the links where you can go get the recorded webinar once it's produced. We do, every once in a while, somebody will experience audio or visual issues. So if you find that happening, the best thing to do is simply to drop off, sign off, and come back into the webinar, and that usually corrects the problem. I would like to now introduce our presenter for today's topic, Sheila Morton. Sheila is a member of our Unanet University team, and if you happen to have attended the Advanced Project Management track at last week's Champions Conference, then you are certainly already familiar with Sheila's expertise. So Sheila, I'm going to hand it over to you. Thank you.
Great, thanks Karen. So welcome everybody to the webinar. As Karen said, my name is Sheila Morton and I work on the Unanet University team. I have a long history of supporting our military, both active duty and as a contractor. And I had only wished that when I was a project manager, I had a tool as cool as Unanet to help me with that. However, now that I have found Unanet, I have certainly found my place in life, and I'm on the training team, looking very much forward to sharing some tips and tricks that I have learned with our team on how project managers can use Unanet for the things that are most important to us. So what I've done is I've created like about 5 topics with about a baker's dozen number of tips. So I think that calculates out to 13. However, I create training kind of like I create Thanksgiving dinner, where I say, what's for dinner? And normally I say, yeah, no problem. I just threw a turkey in the oven and a little bit of side items for us. And it actually turns into a 2-day feast where I have far too much food for the amount of people and the time that it will take to actually eat it, which is similar to what we've got on the training material here. So I'm going to try and provide as much information as I can for us. I've put it into 5 different areas and 13 different tips. So these slides will be available to you afterwards, as well as the presentation in the webinar. So I just ask for you, if there's something you're interested in or something you hear that might be something you could utilize, just write down the tip number. And if you want to follow along, you can. And if I lose you somewhere along the line, just write that tip number down and you can look at it in the webinar later. And then, of course, you can always go back to the CSM and ask for some more detailed information on one of the tips that you learned about in the webinar today. So this webinar, what I've done is I've got these 5 areas. And so as I share tips 1 through 7 for us, I'll have this slide up, and then you'll know that this is the information that I'm going to be sharing. And then when we go to the next section, that way, when you're looking at the webinar later, you'll be able to get a general feel for about where that material was inside the webinar. My overall goal, if you can take away like 5 tips from today's webinar and you can take those and use those in your Unanet, I will have felt very successful in our efforts to try and prepare this information for you. We all know that a project manager's ultimate goal at the end of the day is, can I deliver a quality product or service on time and on budget, and what is the tool that I can use to help me there? So that's what I want to share with you as we get started here. Let's go ahead. I'm going to be tabbing back and forth between the system and the slides. So forgive if I get a little bit clumsy on the navigation, but we'll make it real. Again, questions and stuff that come in, just drop those into the question box. Karen and team are going to be tracking those. We will do our very best to answer them. But if I don't have time to answer them during this webinar, we absolutely will answer every question. We will work with you afterwards and make sure that you get your questions answered. So let's go ahead and get started on this first one. And so this one is about, so this is my first topic for planning resources. We're going to stay within the planning grids for this particular webinar. And I wanted to try and create some forward-thinking tips. So the tip number one is creating a project template. So if you've never created a template before, it's a really good way to create projects that have similar features, and then you can reuse those over and over again by using that copy project feature. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to go log in here into this system, and I'm going to take a look at this one called, I'm just going to look at the search criteria here. You can see that what I've done is I have it as an inactive project. And my code name, I just use a template type code name. But what I want to share with you here is that in this particular project, I can see that this one is by task. So if I have a lot of projects or a lot of contracts that do task level management, it would be helpful to have a template for that. So let's go ahead and click inside here. And there's things that I can carry over from project to project. So as I create this template and say these are the types of tasks, maybe they're on a particular contract, and these are task orders that go over and over again, or this is a particular piece of work that we know it's a milestone type driven work. We could create our administrators on here, and you could set up all of your administrators and this project for maybe a group of your people. Another area to keep in mind is on the expense types. You could create your expense types here for this type of template. That way you don't have to recreate them later. Labor categories. We're going to be going through a lot of these, so I'm going to skip over some of this stuff, but you could create the labor categories on this template. And then when we go back to try and work that project, we could go in and copy this template. Just use that copy feature, select everything. And then when we move over to the actual project, you could just change the name of it. We change the status to something that's relevant for that project. And then again, if it had a different accounting type, you could change that information there. So just a quick tip for you, forward thinking, creating project templates. So the next one I want to take a look at is the difference between the project dashboard and the forecast dashboard. So when we're looking at our project dashboard, we'll take a look really quickly at one of my projects. And if I look down here in my people plans on my plan with here, you can see that I have this grid planner, right? And I can look at all of my plans on my particular grid. You want to keep in mind, you can save the criteria here, but if you notice that my view here is one project, it's project specific. When we have the portfolio license, we have this nice feature of the forecast dashboard and the submenu for people planner. And under people planner, I could take a look now and I can see lots of projects for lots of people, okay? So now I look here, I can now, across the organization, those projects that I have access to, I could now do some planning for lots of folks at the same time on multiple projects, okay? We could do that via tasks as well. If we had set it up via tasks, we could go in and look at our tasks and look at it by the task name, okay? So keeping in mind, using your forecast dashboard, we will use our project dashboard when it's relevant, but this forecast dashboard is very nice to plan and assign people and expenses across multiple projects for multiple people. Okay, so that's tip number 2. On the tip number 3, we're going to talk about promoting plans. So tip number 3 is to promote plans again on our forecast dashboard under our people planner. I have a saved one I've got here just called promoting plans. That the projects you pick here is not super important for the tip. The part that's important for us to understand is when we get over to the grid, when we're happy with our plans, and this is good to, we're good with this information and we're ready to promote these plans over to people assignments. And keep in mind those assignments is the part that allows us to use our timesheets, right? So our people plans promoted over to people assignments. We would like to not have to redo this work, right? We don't want to have to recreate assignments. At the bottom of our planning grid, we have a feature for here, this one button push on the assign, and it instantly takes this whole copy of all of our plans and it creates people assignments and it sits in the people assignment table over here. We just scroll down to the bottom, all the way down. Imagine if I had to recreate all those by myself and hit on the save button, and then of course I could have notified folks all the way to the top. So I could have hit assign. Of course, I have the feature of being able to allow them to exceed their budget or not, right? We don't have time to go into details about that one, but I'm happy to share that with you. If that's one of your questions, just drop that in and Karen will get that for us. And then you would click on save and it instantly creates all of those labor assignments, and now our timesheets are ready to go. So that is promoting plans on the people side. Our expense planner works the exact same way. So under our forecast dashboard, if we look at our expense planner, and we just take a look at my projects, whichever ones you pulled up. Oops. Let's pull up. Oops, sorry. Right? So had I pulled these over and I created some of this information here, I could then go straight over to my budget side and budget that information. Okay? So now it goes from the expense planner over to a budget, and then it would be available on my expense report side of the house. Okay, so that is tip number 3. I do want to share tip number 4, which is some standardization. So tip number 4 is standardizing the planning periods. And for this, we're going to go back to our forecast dashboard and to our people planner. Okay. Now, the tip here I want to try and keep in mind is that if you use a particular period, a planning period, keep that idea of the birds of a feather flock together. If you mix your planning period styles within your organization or within your people or within your projects, it will be more difficult to look and review that information later. You actually cannot modify it if it's not in the right planning period. So what I have here is we have standardizing the period plans, and these are just the ones that I grabbed to show you this example. So I'm going to pull these over into my people planner, and you can see that these folks, I can modify their plans. This is the gray ones. I can't modify that 56 or 64 for Gus. And the first time this happens, we're not sure exactly why. Well, what I've shared with folks is that if you create a planning period that is consistent across a group, either an organization or a type of project, or maybe your Unanet instance as a whole, if you use the same planning period here, then you will be able to modify and look at multiple projects and multiple people at the same time on the same planning grid. Okay, so in this example, my other project happened to be done in weekly periods. And so now you can see as well, I can't modify these folks, but I would be able to modify this. So it gets a little bit confusing, and we want them to work well for us. We want the planning grids to work nicely for us. So try to recommend that you use a planning period that works well for either a group or your organization as a whole. Overall recommendation is that we use timesheet periods. That works really nicely for the majority of our customers. You may have needs to do smaller or larger increments, but keep in mind, you can report on any increment of time, regardless of the way that you planned it. So plan it and assign it in a methodology that works well for the majority of your work. And so if you have a semi-monthly timesheet period, that seems to work very nicely for that. So the same thing happens over on our expense planner side of the house. If we were to have planned in different periods, months versus semi-months, we would not be able to update and modify those particular planning grids. Okay. Keep in mind, I want to make sure you know that that is not a directive of the software. You don't have to plan it in the exact same period. However, you certainly do gain some efficiencies when you use a similar planning period for your efforts. Okay. Tip number 5 is consistent setup. Some consistent setup tips. The one I'm going to share with you is over on our time tab for our project. So let's go take a look at a particular project. And this one, I've got a nice little tip here for us here. So what I've done is I've grabbed a couple of projects that represent a cost plus labor, a fixed price labor, and a T&M labor. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the cost plus labor project. And the one I'm going to focus on is this time tab. So creating some consistent setup. Okay, cost plus, we know that when we create revenue for a cost plus project, we're really not looking at the bill rate. It's going to be built up, right? The cost plus the indirects creates the revenue, and then of course a fee if that applied. So the idea of having a bill rate on the labor category for a cost plus project might not make sense to do this, right? However, I'm going to share with you that this might actually be very, very helpful if we create some consistent setup strategy. Same thing with labor category uses. Even though this is a cost plus, I don't need the labor categories in order to create my revenue. I don't need the labor categories in order to create time. I'm going to require it anyway. Okay, so I set this up, require this anyway. Go back over to my fixed price effort. And we see the same consistent effort here. On my time tab, the setup, my bill rate source is on the labor category bill rate. And we know that with a fixed price effort, we don't have to worry about the bill rate being there. That's not how revenue is created in Unanet using this labor category and a bill rate. However, on the labor category uses, I'm still going to require it, right? Knowing that I don't have to, but I'm going to require because I'm going to get some efficiencies here. But now where I do need to do it in this example where I've created a time and material project. All right, so my time and material project. And on my time tab, the same consistency that I used for my bill rate, now I'm going to say you're going to find the bill rate, and you're not going to find it on the person, you're going to find it on the labor category. That's where you're going to go and get the bill rate. When you get that, times it by the hours, and that's going to give me some revenue. And I'm going to require that they use a labor category for their time. Okay, so I fixed it and made sure that my revenue is going to calculate correctly for my time and material. So we ask ourselves the question, why on earth would I do it for the cost plus and fixed price side of the house? Well, there's two reasons. One is consistency for training. We can train our folks to put the information in a consistent way that they don't have to know a lot more of the details, some of the underlying calculations within the system. I, as a project manager, didn't want to know all that detailed information. I just wanted to know how to set the project up correctly and efficiently. So let's do so consistency and adoption for new users. As new users start to use the system, there's a lot of bells and whistles in here. This would be one area that they wouldn't have to learn the details underlying. They could just set it up this way all of the time. And the other efficiency that we gain, the one I wanted to share with you, is effective reporting for your level of effort. If you wanted to go in and take a look at some reports and you wanted to see what type of level of effort was required for a specific set of projects or a particular customer over the different billing types, you would lose the ability to do that if your cost plus and your fixed price efforts did not have a labor category on that time. So you gain a lot of efficiencies in the reporting side of the house if you create a consistent setup and require labor categories to be used, and you put the bill rate at the labor category, even when you don't need it for certain projects, okay? All righty, let's go ahead and go over to tip number 6. So this is doing an explicit selection over the defaults when it makes sense, okay? So we only want to do this when it makes sense. So when we're explicitly choosing a particular field, or we're allowing the defaults to show up. So I'm going to go to my forecast, my people planner, and I have a tip here in for number 6, selection over defaults, right? And so all I've done is I've got a couple of projects here. And so what I'm going to show is, all right, so what I'm going to show is if I go into Stevie's record here, I've got a blank cell here. If I go into Stevie's record, I can see that the derived defaults here, this is what the system figured out. There's a couple different ways that it figures out, but this is how it derived it, that Stevie should be a business analyst, right? But there's a couple of choices that I could be. If I don't fill this in, it's going to go in as business analyst, and it's going to assume that business analyst did the work. The challenge I have there is that if Stevie's default labor category changes or the derived default changes, then my information in my grid would dynamically change and I would never have seen it. Okay, it's not bound by date. So in a labor category side of the house, it would be more helpful for you if you chose the labor category explicitly. Okay, so you can see here that the derived default was business analyst, but I didn't want him to be an analyst. I wanted him to be a research analyst, right? So I made an explicit selection here. And now the benefit that I gain here is that for the life of this plan, and then as it moves over to the assignment side of the house and what shows up over on Stevie's timesheet, I can be assured that we're going to be using the right labor category, and whatever happens on the underside, I will not negatively impact my project. Okay, that's when it certainly makes sense to use that explicit selection on a labor category. There's another one where I want to recommend that on the cost element side of the house, if we do an explicit selection here, the system will automatically go to this project and it'll look at that field and it's going to use that. If the default for Stevie actually does change, there's value in you knowing that it changed, and Unanet is so awesome in many ways. And one of the things that it does is that it's date bound on your cost element. So the rate that's tied to that cost element to build that up for those indirects, they're tied by the rate. So if we take a look at his rate, I'll just show you that really quickly. Go down and take a look at Stevie. We can see over here on the rates, this cost element is date bound. So if I was to go in and add another one and change them then to company site, any reports that ran would put that information in for those dates. Oops, there's time in here already, but it would be date bound here, and it would grab the right client site rate for when it was time appropriate and the company site rate for when it was time appropriate. Okay, so keep that in mind. The tip is the selection over defaults when it makes sense. Recommended that we do an explicit selection for labor category, and that we choose to let the default resolve itself on our cost element side of the house. All right, so tip number 7, this is the last one in this particular little section here. So on tip number 7, we're going to go over to our projects. This one is streamlining success for project level setup. Okay, and so keep in mind too, the folks who are doing our plans might not have access to some of these fields. So we as project managers, or those people who have access to set this information up, we can do a lot of benefit to folks if we do this for them. So let's go ahead and take a look at Right. So if I'm looking at this particular project here, oh, where was it? Let's do, there we go. Okay, so I have 2 projects here. These are both labor projects, and I'm going to be going in, I'm going to take a look at the, hold for me here, I'll get you there. All right, tip number 7. Here we go. So I have 2 projects here, my labor project and one with no limits. When I go in to do my plans for Gus, notice that I want him to be a project manager, but that's the derived default, but look at all the choices I have. Now, I don't know how long your master labor category list looks, but it could get really, really arduous, right? Could get very large. However, if I want to go in and be helpful and useful for my folks here, if I limited this list on my labor category at the project level, now I only have like a 1 in 5 chances of it actually getting wrong, right? So I've limited the number of mistakes and streamlined the project planning and the assigning side of the house. So it's really, really helpful. We can do that on the labor category side. There's a couple of other areas, but the one I'll mention is on the expense side of the house. So let me take a look at our expense planner, and I have a little tip here for these 2 material projects. These are expense only projects. So you can see I have one that's limited and one's not. So this is at the planning side, but we know that this goes over to the budget side of the house. And then it actually also goes over to our expense reports when we actually go to put in our expense reports. And if you wanted your people to make fewer mistakes, don't give them a list like this, right? They might choose the wrong expense type. If you're trying to budget by expense type, you want to tighten that list down to only the budget items that you're going to be using. This here, of course, is a, 100% gain here, right? But even if you had 2 or 3 items in your expense type, you can see by limiting expense type how that is super helpful in making sure that you limit the number of errors as we go along for that. Bonus tip, let me look at our time. I think I'm doing okay. Bonus tip just for setting this up, keep in mind, I know that all of us on the phone don't have access to setting this up. That's okay. Just note to tell somebody who does have access under the admin tab, under setup, our expense types. Here is where we can set up all those expense types to make them available. And under setup, under people, we have labor categories where our master labor category list would reside along with all of our rates that go up, our escalation rates, okay? You have to be an admin to do that part. Then over on the project side, if we have the project manager role, we would be able to go into our particular project and we can modify this labor category side here. And we could go in here, we see there are none. And we could go to labor categories and I could add some that were relevant for this particular project and then just move them over. And now those would be available and limited that list, okay? A little bonus tip for you there. Hopefully I squeezed that one in on time. Let's go back and take a look at the presentation material. So this is topic area 2, adjusting plans. We will continue to stay in the planning grids. There's a lot of information in here. I'm actually sharing this very small portion of it for you, but hopefully it's very helpful. So this one is about the shortest distance between 2 points. I want to get you to the finish line as fast as possible. So there's a few tips I'm going to share with you here. And when you go to look at that again later, maybe you'll find that a little faster. All right, so we're going to go back to our forecast dashboard. And under our forecast dashboard, this one is going to be tip number 8, using the prior period. Okay. All right, so this is an example I'm going to show you first, not using the prior period. So I've just grabbed a project, I've set it up in a way that works well for me, but what I want to show you is this. So I have some plan records in here, and then I have empty on the left and right. This is what I want to show you the value of. The ones on the left of my entry, if I notice, I don't know what I don't know what this information is, right? I don't know what they used to use. I can see the defaults. However, the items on the right of my entry, I can go in and now I can see the system will pick up the information to the left. Notice that here it had no information to the left, so it didn't know what to do. It showed you some defaults. And on this one, because I had some prior period information, it knew where to look and it pulled up my information that I used last time, which would be helpful. So for Gus, it's not that big a deal because he's a project manager. You know, that was an easy one. But in this one, my system engineers, if I pulled up this one, I could see that the default, it derived itself as program manager. That's not what I wanted. I wanted to know what this person was planned at. And I can see system engineer was where they were. Okay. All righty. Karen, I see hands going up and questions and stuff. If anything I need to stop, please go ahead and stop me. If it's something I can answer at the end, or you guys can answer off in the chat, please go ahead and do that. Otherwise, I will lean heavily on you to tell me when to stop talking. Okay.
No, you can go right ahead. If you do have a question out there, please go ahead and submit it in the questions box in the chat. And
okay.
We'll take care of all the questions at the end. Thank you.
Fantastic. Great. Thanks. Okay, so tip number 9 is about, oh, I'm sorry. So let me show you what it looks like. So this is my normal grid, what it normally looks like when I'm working inside the project. This is the tip here. I use this previous part right here, previous something. Okay, so now I'm using that previous, and now as I set it up, I can see that my previous period was in there, and now I can go in and take a look to see what that was, or if I wanted to go in and look at the details. It makes it a little easier when I'm trying to go in and make the future plans for this particular person. Okay, so tip number 9, shift left, shift right. So say this was a finished plan and we're good to go, or we realized that we really didn't want anything in this column here for April, the last period of April. What I can do, a couple of choices. I can grab the entire grid by using the checkbox and shift everything to the right or to the left. Say, for example, it was just this section I wanted to do, or maybe it was just this one person. Okay, shift left, shift right. The trick is using that little checkbox. And you have to have enough cells in your grid in order to move them left and right. So you wouldn't be able to move them off the grid. All right, tip number 10 is to get click happy. I'm sure there's a song about that out there somewhere, but get click happy on these planning grids. Say that I'm in here and I wanted to go ahead and plan the rest of Gus's effort, right? So everything within the grid for the row, if I double click on the row, it pulls up an entry screen for me here, and I could then go in and modify and put all of this information in all at once. Okay, that's one way to do it. Say, for example, instead, I wanted everybody, I can check this top left corner here, and I can give everybody whatever information I want them to have. I want them to work long hours or whatever. These are full periods, so maybe I do the 80. And then I go ahead and click on save. I change everybody, but then I decide this last period, I don't want them to do that. I just want them to work 4 hours on that one. So I have the choice of the column, I have the choice of the row, and I have the choice of the whole grid. So regardless of which way I choose, keep in mind it's what you filtered the data to be and which area you clicked on. The row, which would be all of the records on the row, the column, every single person inside that period, and then of course the full grid with everybody there. All right, so that is tip number 10. I think we're done with our planning grids. Now we get to do the fun. For those that were at the conference, you got to see this animated person over at table 1 talking about magic metrics. So I've taken some of those pieces of that information. I've brought it into today's tips because I felt it was really helpful, and hopefully you will enjoy it as well. But this tip is about report analysis and using our utilization, revenue, and profitability requirements that we have as project managers. And the tip is to show you some of the criteria that you can use in some of these reports. I'm going to show you 3 reports, and we're going to show you some criteria set up for each one of them that you can use to do your plans, actuals, and your forecast being actuals plus the future. So let's go ahead and take a look at these folks and see if we can find something interesting in the system. All righty. And this one, I'm actually going to change databases here, and instead I'm going to open up the database that I had stored for us. There we go. So this is that Magic Metrics database that actually is still open for folks. If anybody wants to log in and use that after this webinar, I'm happy to give you the path name for this and the username that I used in here. I think we're going to keep it open like in a couple more days or whatever, but if that works for you, you're welcome to go in and take a look at that. So here, let's take a look. This is a utilization side of the house. So let's go open these guys in a new window. Okay. And so under our reports dashboard, the reports that we're going to use for utilization, the question is, am I utilizing all of my staff, all the people that I'm responsible for? Am I keeping them fully, not employed is not the right word, but am I keeping them fully staffed on plans and assignments? There's two ways to look at this. You could look at this under the resource section. And if you see resource allocation and bar chart, if we looked at the report under this section, this would be because we had the resource planner role within Unanet. Okay, this report allows us to see information for the resources, but it doesn't give us that drill down, right? Because we don't have access to people, we only have access to resource information. However, if you have access to the manager role, then you would have access to these people reports, and now you see the exact same name, resource allocation, but there's a little bit of an additional functionality here where you are able to actually drill into this particular report. So I have a saved report just for purposes of our time available. And let's take a look at my before plan. So the question is, I'm executing, I'm working, everybody's actively working, and when are my people not going to be covered? What's their utilization for my active, open, executing work? So I use project status as the field to help separate that. I'm using plans. Is the information I'm working on. That's what makes this special. There's one more special thing, but I'm not going to show that yet. You're going to figure it out when you see it. We're taking a look at the resource allocation because it's the people I have access to go in and click into Gus. But if I notice it's red, now base system Unanet delivers the color coding that red is bad, they're overstaffed, right? But as a project manager, we're more concerned that our staff is not covered down. They don't have enough work in order to keep them utilized, right? So I changed the colors, the book percentage color, I change that so that it makes sense for me, the person who's looking at this particular report. So keep this in mind as a person who can save your own reports, or as an admin creating reports for your staff. Keep in mind who's looking at it and what is the value of the color to them, okay? I'm going to go back and take a look, and I see now that my people don't have enough work. If I was to go in and use Unanet as a proposal engine and create it as my proposal efforts, and all I did was change my criteria to now show my executing and my plan, my projects that are represented by proposals or planning efforts. And if I can then run this exact same report, I now see that my folks are covered down for a little while. They have enough work to keep them busy. If I wanted to go in and take a look at Gus, I could go in and see what records were there. Let's go back now and say, now I'm going to look at it as actuals. The only difference I've made in this report, only change for the criteria, is I've gone in my report options, I've changed it from those plans to actuals. So now I want to look at actuals, same color coding, and now I look at this and I see, oh, my actuals, my folks are being utilized, they're doing really well. Poor Sean's being overworked. Let's find out what Sean's working on. I can click into Sean and I can see very easily that Sean's been working on this one effort over here. I now have a piece of information I can go and look and work with Sean and find out, hey bud, what's going on with this type of this metric here, okay? Same report. Forecast, we're always looking in the future, right? We can't win a race if we're looking at the starting block or we're looking at what we did yesterday. So we always want to look in the future. So in the future, I've just configured this report. The only change I made is down in reporting options. I've changed this to now show actuals plus my assignments. In Unanet, assignments is the work that's authorized on our timesheet, correct? So in order to do that, I want to take a look at my actuals plus my assignments. I want to use actuals through the prior period. When I ran this, it happened to be the 15th. And that's the only change that I made. I now run the report and I can say everything that they've done so far. Remember, Sean worked too much. And then I made some changes and I've rebalanced it. And I can see that Sean's looking pretty good after this. Gus, unfortunately, is losing work. Gus is not going to have any work out in the June timeframe. I could go in and look here at Gus and I could see that this project must be ending. Okay. What's nice about this is it's color coded. It's one report. Configured 3 or 4 different ways for me to see some really key actionable items. So I might not know how to fix a problem, but I can certainly see that there is a problem simply by looking at color. Okay, now I want to take a look and I want to show you this one on revenue. So this revenue one, am I using all the money that I've been given to run on my project, right? So on this one, instead of looking at these people reports, I'm going to go up here and take a look at this project accounting report. And under the summary reports, we're using this one called project revenue and funding summary. Okay, so that's the report that we're going to be using. To access this particular report, you would have to be one of the administrator roles, or you would have to be a project administrator and a cost rate manager. Now, we also know that folks don't always want their they're on the ground project managers. We don't always want them to have access to cost rate information. There's a setting inside the system under admin properties that would allow a non-cost rate manager to review these summary reports. So if that's of interest to you, be sure to ask your CSM about that, and we can get you some additional information on how to do those settings. There's also some other things that we've done with some of our customers to try and limit only this one revenue report for folks that don't need their project managers to see profit, but they do want them to see the revenue side of the house. So we have some solutions for you in there if these are of interest for you. So I'm going to take a look at this on my plans, right? So on the revenue side of the house, I just configured this to show my project. Here's what makes it special. Date range, I did BOT, EOT, everything inside, everything that's been planned, and I want to use my forecast option of include plans only. These are the two things that make this special for what I'm sharing with you as it relates to this tip. I run this particular report. Now, I don't want you being too concerned with all of these columns. I certainly don't need to be concerned with those as a project manager, but what I do want to know is this to date BOT, EOT, right? So what this means is everything inside the grid, beginning and end of time, add it all up, that's what is in my grid, $100,000 of plans in this example. Budgeted field, hard-coded hand-typed field on the project's budget tab. I probably don't have access to this as my Gus lead guy. He's this particular user doesn't have access to that project profile tab. But if I subtract those two, I have done a good job against my budget. The other one to look at is my funded value, right? So while I've been budgeted 100,000, I've only been funded 50. This is an example of incrementally funded project. So again, in my grid is $100,000 of plans. I've only been funded 50, so I have a negative $50,000 here. We would want a forward plan, right? Create a pipeline so we can see what could happen if all of the revenue comes in the house. So this would be a good plan. Let's take a look at this, because now the important part is we never, ever want to create work assignments for more than what we have money to pay for. Correct? So if I take a look at this as my assignments, I'm only going to promote enough plans to consume my funded value. And I want to make sure that I don't go at risk for anything. Same report, same criteria, BOT, EOT. The only change I made is this forecast option. I changed it from plans to assignments. No other changes. I now run the report. And then again, I don't care about all these other columns. I just care about my BOT, EOT. Everything in my grid is 50,000. Against my assignments, timesheet authorization, good to go. And then my funded value is 50. I have good plans and good assignments. I'm good to go. This was a good setup here. One report, I only had to learn 3 pieces of information. It's a lot easier to learn 3 than it is to learn what there are 12 fields there. Okay, now we want to take a look at this from the forecast side. We could look at it as actuals, but for time permitted, I want to get to the other items. Actuals plus assignments. So this is what my forecast looks like, right? As I'm doing periodic reviews on a periodic basis, actuals are going to come in. I'm going to make modifications to my future. This is the only change I've made. I looked at actuals through last week. I run this, and I can see here very quickly that I've got a backlog here of 50, or my funded value is 50. I'm going to run out of money, right? So my funded value is 50. Everything inside my grid, my actuals plus my assignments, is 52. I'm going to run out of money if I don't make a change. One report, one field, I could see it's red, and I now have an instantaneous piece of information that I know I need to make a change somewhere along the line, okay? All right, so that's on that one. Last one to take a look at is our profit side. This one I'll go through really quickly. On our profit side, as project managers, we really want to make sure that we've planned within a particular profit rate and that we are executing, as in we finished the race at a particular profit rate. Okay, so for profitability for our project managers, there's 5 reports that we could use. I'm going to show one called cost summary and status. So under my reports dashboard, project accounting reports, the access to get to this report is the exact same access as this one. Okay, cost summary and status. I'm going to take a look at this one that I had for plans. What makes this special? All this other criteria is really nice and it is important, but this is the one I want you to take away. Cost report name. Unanet has an ability to have custom cost reports, and I'll say configured cost reports because it's not custom. You can create them yourself as long as you're an admin. You can create a cost report that's relevant and has the right information for the people who will be looking at this. So we saw traditionally, we see this default JSR. There's lots of reports here. I made one called tip for PM profit just to keep it really simple. But that's what makes it special. And I'm going to take a look at this and now notice that there's only 2 lines. It would be much easier to teach a brand new project manager how to read 2 lines or 1 line than it would be to teach them how to use the default JSR, right? If we were to take a look at one of these other ones. For a brand new person going in and taking a look at this, this could be relatively intimidating. So keep in mind, the tip to take home with you is this cost report name. It's configured through the admin dashboard with admin rights. So if that's of interest to you, ask your CSM. We'll get you some more information about that. All righty. So I think I'm going okay. I'm going to go. All right, let's go back to. I was like, what is that? How are we doing? Okay. 4 and 5, this is now supporting. So I like to get to the finish line as fast as possible. I like 1 click to get me where I want to go, 2 if I actually have to. And every time I click a button, I want to know that there's something for me to look at, a piece of information that will tell me that I'm on track or not. Okay, so that's this section here. And let me get rid of that. All righty, we're going to use, for those that were at the conference, that last session was our tips and tricks. And we had some really good stuff in there. I'm actually going to have to just open it up here. Alrighty. Alrighty. So this is, I hope everyone on the line already knows this about our left side dashboards, right? Our left side dashboards are configured by us as users. We have a lot of information out on the help docs and on the Knowledge Center to help you with that. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. But the tip is for that is to use that left side dashboard. The thing I'll share with you is making sure that you don't clutter up your home dashboard with a lot of stuff. Okay, if you're trying to make sure that people that you know where you're going, don't get this list any crazier than what is going to be effective for you. If you have things that are dashboard specific, stick them over on the right dashboard. Put them in the dashboard that makes sense. So that's the tip to take away from you there. The other one to take away is on our right side dashboard. So this is the one that I talk about all the time. Okay, right side dashboard. We saw in one of our other systems that our right side dashboard, our magic metric one, notice that this was my right side dashboard, custom links, some really cool stuff. These were 1-click solutions to drive a project manager directly to a report, a saved shared report that they don't have to worry about trying to configure, and you don't have to worry about that they're going to see information that they don't have access to. Okay, so the tip to take away is right side dashboard. How do I create custom links? And we create custom links through a file called link.xml. Oops. The link.xml is a file within your Unanet folder structure. And you can modify this and you can create these saved shared reports. This is an ad hoc report. This is super awesome. This ad hoc report was created by an admin. We took the link and we put it over on our dashboard here on the side. So now people can go in and see a really cool ad hoc report that's got some really neat information in there for us. We could also do a saved shared report. This one's important because you're going to see this here again. So this is one of our saved shared reports. Notice the S number up here at the top. It was saved by an admin. We could use a customer map. This would be an external path outside of Unanet that you have control over, and we can see where all of our customers are. Love this map, absolutely love this map. And then of course, if we had an external system of sort, if we wanted to give a 1-click option for someone to get into their payroll system, we could link that. So the tip to take away is the right side dashboard. The how is link.xml. And the details on that, there actually is a help doc file out here under help. If you just type link.xml, they'll pull up some nice information about that. But please don't think that it's just look at it and do it on your own. Give us a yell, give us a call. We'll be happy to help you with that file. And both hosted and on-premise clients can do that. So that is not limited to the type of license that you work with or where you are, where it's located. All right, the last one I really like. I have to go back over to the slide because it was just too difficult to make it live, but I want to show you who has received this email. Notice that this wasn't me, this was a remedial trainee that received this email, but we've seen this email come out in our system, and this is available within Unanet. This linking here, see this link right here? This is the tip. So the tip is for deep linking. Is that the one? Yes, tip 14, deep linking. I'm going to show you how to do this really, really quickly. So this is the one that we've seen all the time, but now what if, imagine we're doing project management, right? This is great for employees. What if project managers, if you created a deep linking email and instead it was project management driven? So now you send a periodic email that goes out that tells people on a periodic basis, hey PMs, it's time to do your reviews, and you give them a link. Notice the S number. You give them a link that they can click on, and when they do, it launches their instance. They would have to log in if they hadn't been logged in, and it launches that save shared report for them that they can quickly go in right away and take a look at it. And it could be any save shared report that we have in the system that you've created, okay? How we do that really, really quickly, because we're about 15 minutes out. So how we do that really quickly is under the admin. We'd have to have admin rights, right? And under setup, these email reminders, we would create an email reminder. I did one here called broadcast. And then in this message here, this is where I created the message, and I used the saved shared report. Okay, I don't have time to show you how to do a saved shared report, but if you do not know how and you need to know how, please put that in your questions. We'll make sure to get that information to you. Overall, the big tip for that is you have to put that saved report on a dashboard, and then you'll be able to get that S number or the ad hoc number if it was an ad hoc report. All righty, and so that's how you set it up. Now, how do you send it, right? Now that we've got it up, how do we send it? We go over to the admin reminders area, and under reminders, we can go grab that one that I created, right? And then I could decide who I wanted to send it to. Maybe I just want to send it to these people. Maybe there's an approval group I want to send it to, a type of people, and then the schedule, how often I want to send it to them. Okay, so you could create a really actionable email for folks that they get on a regular basis, and they don't have to figure out how to get back in the system. One click stop to get an actionable item for them. All right, the last one I'll share with you, because I do want to make sure you have time for a few questions, and Karen has some great info about some of the stuff coming up, so I want to get back over to her on this, but this one is about, let's see. So we need to use instructor 4, very good. So this one's about the project alerts. So as project managers, i.e. somebody who has a project manager role within Unanet, okay, you have the feature of being able to do this alert. If you're logged in as somebody without project manager role, they would not have access to this tab. So this is how we can help our project administrators use the system by creating some of these alerts. So if this one had been set up with no alerts whatsoever, right, I've lost all the function and features in here and nobody will be reminded of anything. But if instead I had changed this to use the defaults, or I customized it and made it something super special, if I use these defaults, now I can go ahead and save this information, and when the system runs and it hits these particular triggers, they would get an email about that. Okay, the thing I want to share with you here as well, an email and a notification, I'll share the other side too. On our tasks, if you have one task that really needs to have some attention paid to it, say it's this one admin, you could create alerts for this task based on the project settings. Okay, so if you like this, the profile here on our profile, if you like the alerts, right, these are at the project level, but if you want them to be at the task, you can go in and tell which task you want it to carry that same information. When that happens, then when they log into the system, let me get out of here. When they log into the system, they will now have this alert at the top, this little red line, and they can click inside here and they can see what the alert is. And then if they get really interested in the information, they can actually click inside and see a project status report. Oh my goodness, we can click even deeper. Look at this. Go right into the project and so instantaneous information for me as I learn to navigate through the system. And all of that happened because the project manager role within Unanet set up the project alert, and I actually looked up at the top of my screen and did something with that. Okay, I want to make sure that folks have a chance to answer some questions. Please keep them easy because I'm only so smart. And double check that. Ms. Karen, how are we doing?
We've got quite a few questions, Sheila, and I'm going to.
I only want the easy ones.
Well, I will say some of them are complex, so I'm going to let everybody know we have about 15 or 16 questions. So some of these we just may have to follow up with you separately, but I am going to take them in the order I received them. So the first one was, how do you add a new employee to an existing plan?
Okay, I might be able to answer that one. So if I think I understand it correctly, let's go see if we get to the right project. Okay, so we have a plan for our folks, right? We have our people plan. Actually, I like the forecast dashboard. I'm just more comfortable with that. So let's go to the forecast dashboard and let's take a look at my people. Oops. Oh, I don't like this one. I don't like that system. That one wasn't configured for us. Let's do one that was configured better for us. Oh, good old welcome. Really? Come on. Local system, G lead. Oh, caps. Yeah, C-O-M-E. I'm so sorry. Hold, please. I'm almost there. All right, W-E-C-O-M-E. Okay, so on my forecast, my people planner, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at my projects here. And so I think the question was, how do I add a new person to this list if I want another person on there? So if the question is how to add a new person to the database, I'm going to defer that one to later because that's not project management specific, but it's how do I get another person on this? If I have access to them, I would go in and filter. They need to be inside my filter. And now I can say I want all of these people, right? So maybe Genevieve was my new person that I wanted in my grid. So I want to I make sure that I have access to Genevieve, and then I put her in my filter, and then she comes over here, and I now would be able to see. Don't get caught here. I get caught here all the time. Include existing plans only. Genevieve didn't have a plan, right? That's why she didn't show up when I checked that box. And now I can see Genevieve is in the record. So depending on the actual question, if I understood it correctly, the tips to take away is one, I have to have access to that person. I have to be able to plan them. And I could find that out by putting in the criteria here to go find that person. And then on my grid, make sure that I'm not choosing the existing plans only. And then I bring them over and then I would be able to see that. To the extent, a little tip for you here, if I wanted to take Gus and I want to move him to Genevieve, now that I have Genevieve in my grid, I could swap everything from Gus down to Genevieve. Okay, so hopefully that answers the question there. If not, just let Karen know and we will follow back up with you afterwards.
Okay, very good, Sheila. The next one is, does promoting take all the hours and populate employees' timesheets?
Promoting plans, if we promote our plans and we take these over here and we promote this information, we're actually creating a record in the assignments table for these. And when people go into their time record, the projects that are showing up over here, these are the ones that they have assignments for. So I think the answer is yes, but not like directly. It's taking it from the plan, putting it into the assignment, and then when they open their timesheet and they create their timesheet, the records that show up are the ones that they have an assignment record for.
Does it show the hours associated with them?
That they were assigned, yes. So for example, I know this is an old one, but here, if I looked at here, this one had a project I was assigned to this project, and I could look at my little eyeglass there, and I could see how many hours were put in here. I was budgeted 18. I've actually done 18. I have a variance of 0. Okay.
All right, very good.
Sound like an answer to that question? Okay.
Okay, the next one is it bad? It's never bad, but is it bad to mix plans at the project level and at the task level? For example, if we expect an option year, but we're not sure what the task lines will be, can we record those plans at the project level and the current option period at the task level? Or would that be an anti-best practice?
I know that there's going to be requirement. You're going to have needs when that's going to happen. You're not going to be sure which plan or which level to put them at. However, there is a very strict best practice that if you're going to be planning it at the project level, you won't be able to promote those over to assignments using that. Here, let's take a look and see if I can get it set up pretty quickly. Okay, so I have this here. Let's see, I've got this project and this project. Okay, so if I look at these, one of these was set up at the project level, and this one was set up at the task level, right? If I was to have done this differently, and instead I planned this guy at the task level and I tried to promote them over, I would get an error here that says this project does not allow assignments at the project level, whichever one I chose. It has to do with this flag right over here on my project. It has to do with this flag, whether I manage it at the task level or not. So when we're planning it, you can absolutely plan it at the project or the task level and everything is great. But when you want to try and promote those over to assignments, if you've planned it at the opposite level, either you planned it at the project level and it requires tasks, or you planned it at the task level and it doesn't allow tasks, a way to work around that is to go ahead and use the import export. It does take a little bit of work there, but you could export it, add those tasks in, or export it, take those tasks out, and then re-import that information in. Okay, but the tip to take away is that if, depending on how this project management level is set, this determines whether your assignments, the timesheets, whether your assignments can have tasks or not when you put that assignment together. So if you plan it at the project level and you're trying to assign it and you've got this checked, it comes up with that error because I'm going to get rid of everything that's not at the right level. And that is checked, then it'll come up and say, sorry, I need tasks. And then the same thing happened, that if you planned it at the task level and you tried to promote those plans over to people assignments, you would see an error that says, sorry, I don't need tasks in order to make this happen. Okay, so the recommendation is to do it at the level you think it's going to be, and if it's not, then use that import export feature to fix that up. But hopefully that answers the question there. And I know we're almost out of time here too. Let's make sure we get back with all of these questions, because I want to respect people's time, but I wanted to also know the next time we're going to be speaking and our next training, because we have some really cool trainings coming up.
Okay, so that's the bottom of the hour. Sheila, I want to thank you, and I certainly want to thank all the attendees for being Unanet customers. The CS7 team, if you were at the Champions Conference last week, you may recognize some of our pictures, but we'd like to, all of us, wish you a very good day. Thank you.